welcome to ACF Chefs Forum. We appreciate all of you tuning in today for this webinar on workplace wellness with CHOW. Thank you to our webinar sponsor, Hormel Food Service. With a dedicated team of direct food service experts, Hormel Food Service is committed to providing consultation, innovation, and support to help ease the load. ACF is excited to have an expert here with you with information just for you, the leaders of the food service industry. Before we begin, as a note, we'll be answering as many questions as possible throughout and after the presentation. Please use the chat function to collaborate with other viewers and use the Q&A function anytime during the session to post questions to today's speaker. Let's get the discussion going in the chat and start by telling us where you're tuning in from. I am JJ Vitale. I am the American Culinary Federation's brand new Director of Communications, and it is a privilege to meet all of you today. Now, let's meet today's presenter. Jazz Parks Papalopoulos is currently the Chief Growth Officer for CHOW. For years, she struggled with high-functioning anxiety, and it wasn't until she delved deep into her behavioral patterns and life choices that she could see how her most harmful traits and habits were nestled in the profession she had chosen. She came to CHOW in 2020 for support in detaching herself from an industry that she had hidden her discomfort in for so long. She needed new ways to forward and surround herself with people who, like her, were struggling to establish their identity and support their mental health. Now, as part of the CHOW team, she is passionate about building an interactive community that extends everyone the accepting and warm welcome she received when joining CHOW. Her goal is to increase visibility for her organization and spread the word about their message. And at this time, I'll pass the presentation over. Take it away, Jazz.
Thank you. Thank you, JJ, for the awesome introduction. And thank you so much for this impactful invitation to be here and to talk about our mission, the things that we are passionate about at CHOW, and a lot of the challenges that we see that affect workplace wellness nowadays, coupled with all of the incredible resources that CHOW has put together in order to support food, beverage, hospitality workers. So in addition to my bio, one of the things that makes me uniquely qualified to have these conversations in these rooms is the fact that the core of my professional tenure at CHOW has been delineated by the fact that almost daily I say, I wish I had known this when I was in the industry. I wish I had had this when I was in the industry. I came to CHOW a little over 3 years ago as an attendee. I was a product of the Great Resignation. I retired from the industry as an executive chef and head of food and beverage, which was an incredibly challenging position. And my personal experience in the industry was that the more my professional career was successful, the better I did, the more my mental health was the price that I kind of paid for that. And I didn't have the tools, skills, or resources to be able to support myself and to support my team effectively. And a lot of what I've learned at CHOW in the last 3 or 4 years has been exactly that. How do I show up for myself? How do I show up for other people? A lot of my experience has also, and other people's experience as well, has informed the development of CHOW programming. We pride ourselves on being a listening organization that is created for us, by us. That's why our tagline is CHOW is us helping us, because we develop things that are relevant. We keep our pulse on the finger of the food, our finger on the pulse of the food, beverage, hospitality industry. We listen to the needs as they arise, and all of us have brought experience that has shaped our programming. I actually found out about CHOW when I was head of food and beverage, and I remember going to my GM and saying, I would like to temp check my team, and stand by. We will temp check and talk about this resource in just a few moments. But I remember going and saying, I would like to temp check my team. It was the beginning of the pandemic. Everybody had been struggling a little bit and just kind of very superficially sharing a little bit of those challenges, right? Because it can be really scary to flag to someone that you're uncomfortable, struggling, not having a good time. And I will never forget, my GM looked at me and said, okay, you're gonna, right before the shift, you're gonna temp check your staff, and then what? If one of your staff members is not doing well, do you have the capacity to just send them home? What are you going to do? Because this sounds like opening up a can of worms that we have no solution to. So maybe now is not the time to have this conversation. And I took that now is not the time to have this conversation, and I put it in my back pocket. So I'm here to tell you today that a lot of the things that I'm going to walk you through today, both the challenges and the resources, they are there, they are tested, and they are follow through safe, right? So every aspect of CHOW's programming is delineated to get you to start a conversation, to keep you safe and protected in that conversation, and to give you a follow-up resource that allows for you to continue checking up on yourself and folks around you, so that we are never saying, let's start a challenging conversation, and then we have no idea where it goes. There is no follow-through. We are just, throwing things at the wall to see what sticks. So I'm very grateful to be here. I feel incredibly privileged to be welcomed into these rooms. And I hope that today we can have you share your experiences as well. I would love for this to be conversational. And like JJ said, please share your questions. I would love to address anything that comes up for you. And I'm going to get you started with some numbers, because a lot of times I think we all know, right, that this conversation has a lot of merit. Talking about mental health allows for food, beverage, hospitality workers to show up to work as their best whole selves. But a lot of times we don't know what those numbers look like. So the core of CHOW's mission is based on the fact that currently the hospitality industry is growing at such an incredible rate that currently, if every single food, beverage, hospitality worker were to be seen by a clinical mental health care provider, right? And that's not looking at our sometimes really wild work schedules that make it kind of challenging for us to, go to therapy 9 to 5, or the funding that in some cases might be inaccessible to some demographics. If we don't consider those things, and if each and every one of us was to be seen by a clinical mental health care provider tomorrow, we would still outnumber them 29 times over, which means that our industry is growing. There is a lot of interest in what we are doing. There are folks who are passionate about service, about food, about hospitality, about being guest-centered, and we fundamentally know hospitality. We know how to extend service to other folks. We are the memory makers. We are the foundational backdrops of birthdays, anniversaries, milestone vacations. It is an incredible privilege, and that privilege comes with a lot of vocationally specific challenges. So we know, for example, that SAMHSA collated some evidence to see what substance misuse looked like in professional industries. This information was last collated in 2018. So that's pre-pandemic. Knowing what we know about how the pandemic influenced the food, beverage, hospitality industry and the individual lives of service workers who were often deemed essential workers and who were working in unprotected spaces in unprecedented times, it is not absurd to assume that this number is probably still the same. So in 2018, the food service industry rated #1 in substance misuse, which is also a staggering number. It means that there are so many things, so many challenges to look at the same time. Things like having a long-standing history of disincentivizing self-care. Some of us have work hours that are conducive to substance misuse. There's an excellent article written by the chef Greg Baker who talks about the quiet hour. What happens when the kitchen spits you out at midnight and the only thing that is open is a neighborhood bar, and the rest of the staff is sitting there, and it might be the only conversation you have before you go home and your family is asleep and your schedule is what it is, right? So we're so new to having these conversations that are nuanced about how the system demands more attention, right? It demands more care. It demands more self-care. And we know that self-care can be kind of a polarizing term, because when we speak in CHOW spaces about self-care, we're not talking about bubble baths. We're not talking about magazine subscriptions. We're talking about nitty-gritty self-service. To us, self-service means, what can Tuesday Jasmine do to set up Thursday Jasmine? That might not be as glamorous as a bath bomb and taking a 15-minute walk. It might be doing difficult things like scheduling my therapy appointment, making sure that I'm using my EAP so that I can see a financial advisor and to come up with a budget, because I am a salary employed who employs tipped workers whose budgeting might look a little bit different than what traditional budgets might look like in a finance class. So we like to talk about things with a really specific food, beverage, hospitality lens, and that's what we're going to be doing today. And a little bit of this requires your participation. So I'm going to share some more numbers with you because I'm a numbers gal and I love to have the space set by the people that came before us. And before I do that, I want to encourage everyone. First, your participation is voluntary. Active listening is as much a contribution as sharing. If you feel the need to take care of yourself, step away for a moment and then come back, I want to make sure that everyone participating in this conversation is feeling safe, heard, and seen. So please take care of yourselves however you can so that you can participate today. And I would like for you to bravely participate in these exercises because the more we engage in these conversations that in the past have been prohibitive to our industry, the more we minimize the stigma around them. So the first number that CHOW has collated is that 84% of food, beverage, hospitality workers feel extreme stress from their job. If you relate, you can drop a reaction in the chat. You can drop a thought in the chat. If you are someone or know someone or love someone in the food, beverage, hospitality industry that has experienced extreme stress from their job, this is your moment to kind of stand and say I, and I will gladly stand and say I will say that when I left the industry, it took me months of CHOW discussion groups and therapy to just start to feel like myself again, because all of those issues had never been addressed while I was in the industry. So instead of processing slowly, I left the industry and had no idea how to integrate in a life where I wasn't looking at those things in the face. The second one is that 53% of food, beverage, and hospitality workers feel like they've been pushed to their breaking point. Now, this number is an interesting one because one, it's a self-reported one, and not everyone wants to click that box to let us know that they've reached their breaking point because that sounds like a kind of scary thing to admit to yourself and others. And two, the term breaking point is incredibly subjective. In my own human experience, I have found that whenever I'm at rock bottom, my rock bottom tends to have a basement. It's got a couple of floors underneath. I think that I've tumbled down the stairs to the lowest point, and I'm like, no, there was a little bit more in there. I don't know if that speaks to my industry resilience or it's just my human experience, but I've definitely been pushed to my breaking point. And I can safely say now, after years of processing in protected spaces, that had I known that these resources were available and had they been offered to me at the time, I would not have made the choice to leave the industry behind me. And that's at the core of CHOW's mission. We want to support the lives of food, beverage, hospitality workers by sharing shared stories, skills, and resources. We're not here to replace therapy. We're here to give you vocationally specific tools to thrive that are relevant to the things that are most pressing to you. And we don't want folks leaving the industry. We want everyone to practice the same skills and tools and coping mechanisms that we have learned from other folks in the industry so that we can all stay in the industry, build a sustainable workforce and a healthier, saner food, beverage, hospitality industry for all. So one of the things that we're often asked is, how do I do what's best for my team? I'm a leader. I want to be able to support my team. Tell me how to do what's best for my team. And we love that question because one, it speaks to industry resilience, right? The selflessness of food, beverage, hospitality workers, the guest-focused and team-focused experience. And I'll tell you, we're based on the military brigade system, right? Heavily inspired by the military brigade system. And I have this conversation often with my partner, who's a military service member. And even when I was in the industry, we would compare notes. And I would ask him for leadership tips and advice. And I would say, within my team, I see this happening. How would you handle it? Well, here's the thing that they don't tell us about the military brigade system is that it is insulated with in between hierarchical supports that make it so that no one is making decisions by themselves the way that we do in the food, beverage, hospitality industry. Being a leader within our industry can be incredibly lonely work in a way that in the military is actually met with a lot of strategic support so that folks are not bearing that burden alone. There's a lot of systems of accountability. There's a lot of programs developed to be able to offer financial, emotional, psychological support that we don't have a lot of access to. So it's almost like we took the model, but we didn't insulate it with those supports. And so that's what we hope to do at CHOW. When we're asked the question, how can I do what's best for my team? Our official answer is you model doing the best that you can for you. And that is the way you most effectively support your team. So, what that means is finding out a little bit about the actionable skills and resources that we have, trying them out, having open conversations with your team about the experience that you had while using this resource skill tool, and giving them the opportunity to ask questions and kind of soak up your human experience so that they can be inspired, supported, and moved going forward. Trying these actionable skills in a period of regulation allows it for us to thrive in times of dysregulation. Now, what does that practically mean? It means that we use these skills to share successes and struggles when we are not struggling, so that when we are struggling, we are operating from a place of a heavy foundation of trust, honesty, respect, and most importantly, follow through. We do the side work on the slow shift, right? We prep before the rush. Just like achieving a perfectly julienne pepper is incredibly hard in the middle of a Saturday 9 p.m. rush, it can be more challenging than prepping it ahead of time. That's the way that practicing these resources daily can help us during more challenging times. So, how do we do this? We learn how to support ourselves and others in effective and measurable ways. A great way to do this that we encourage folks to try out is to try out our CHOW temperature take. You can do this at the beginning of a pre-shift. You can do it during your monthly staff meetings. You can send out a mass email to your team, and you can ask them to hit reply all with their preferred temperature for the day. Why do we do this? We know that we have way more food words than we have feeling words. I can speak on personal experience to this. When I was in the industry, had you asked me to describe a steak, I would have had a Shakespearean level of descriptors for you. Very rich of adjectives. You know, it's got abundant marbling, a rich, juicy flavor. It's tender, it's rich, perfectly seasoned, cooked to perfection. But if you had asked me how I was feeling on any given day, I would say happy, sad, hungry. Those were my big three. So the temperature take will show you that we are using what we already know, and we are using it in our favor. So service for the self. We have the meat temperatures delineated on a scale of rare to well done. Rare meaning I'm juicy, full of life. Well done meaning I've been on the grill for far too long. Help me out here. And under these descriptors, meat descriptors, we have a lot of feeling words. And you'll notice that we try to stray away kind of from the traditional, my favorites, happy, sad, hungry, so that we can practice checking in with ourselves. What is the value of the temperature check? The value of the temperature check is being able to gauge where we are at. We can't know where we're going if we don't know where we're at today. And here's what we've learned so far at CHOW in the last 6 years. One of the reasons that we often don't talk about mental health is because we feel like, what if something comes up that I can't handle? What if I open up a can of worms that has no follow through? So much like my GM said back in the day, what if you do a temp take with your team and somebody checks in, well done? What could you possibly do about it? Well, we've got great systems of what you could possibly do about it. And we mean that in small, actionable ways. There are ways that we can support. What that means to us is that this temperature take, first and foremost, please everybody put this in your back pocket. Everything that I will be talking about today as a CHOW resource is available free of cost as a downloadable PDF on our website. So this temperature take is page 1 of maybe 60 in our Workplace Wellness Toolkit. Our Workplace Wellness Toolkit is a labor of love and a half. We did so many listening tours where we were incredibly privileged to be welcomed into restaurants, hotels, local businesses, where we asked what was working and what wasn't within that specific organization. And we came up with so many tips that were shared with us about small things that you can practice with your team that have quantifiable positive results if practiced for long enough. And we put that all together. Once you see this document, it'll be delineated on the right-hand side with some tabs that are clearly marked $5, 5 minutes, $10, 10 minutes, $20, 20 minutes, based on whatever your budget is in both emotion and finance that day. You can skip to the part that is most relevant to you, and you can pick out something that you can try with your team to open communication and destigmatize these conversations, much like the temperature take. The temperature take is in there. We encourage that you share it with your community, with your organization, and that you practice it often. And now for the question of the follow through. This is the challenging part. So what happens if you are checking in and you've got a 10-member team and you've got 5 well dones? Now you're thinking to yourself, how am I going to send these people home? The only answer is to send people home. Well, we would challenge you on that. That's been the food, beverage, hospitality industry historically. Leadership comes with the great burden of making decisions for everybody. But what we have learned is that when we share that conversation, we empower everybody with the same resources. We give folks the ability to self-report with self-efficacy. We find that we can tackle a lot of issues together without one member having to make decision-making, really heavy decision-making for the rest of the team. So how do we support the team? The way that we support others is not by overextending ourselves when we are not qualified to assist in their personal story. So if I can give you a gift today, it is to put this in your back pocket. Sometimes the most gentle thing that we can say to support ourselves and our team and our community is to say, I'm concerned, but I am not qualified. Can I sit with you while I get you connected to the right resource? Tell me what it looks like when you are well done on this shift today. Would you like to take a fresh air break after the first hour of service to make sure that I'm keeping up with you? Do you need to trade stations for the day? And all of these tips that I'm giving you as a result of hearing a lot of well dones are all in that workplace wellness toolkit, right? So there's an entire page that you can scroll through. You got 10 well dones, you've got 10 solutions for what to do with that well done. It does not mean that you are opening up a can of worms that you don't really know how to address. And it doesn't mean that it's going to tank service, right? We can care personally for people, get our professional outcomes squared away, and we can work at it all together without one person having to make the decision for many. So doing this might sound a little crunchy. The first couple of times that you're going to say, I care, I'm concerned, but I'm not qualified, it can feel a little crunchy. I'll be honest with you. This doesn't mean that we don't care about them deeply, right? It doesn't mean that we don't care about them personally. It means that we are becoming the very impactful connection that someone needs to the appropriate resource. And the appropriate resource, by the way, might just be a poster that you've printed out with mental health resources that sits in the back right next to your recipe binder and right next to the binder that keeps all of the chemical listings for your cleaning products. Or it might be giving them an additional fresh air break. It might be the context that allows for you to just switch stations for the day so that folks can have a break from whatever is forefront on their mind that day. And please remember that in this case, when we are doing temperature checks, listening is as much a contribution as speaking. Connection and follow through can often be way more impactful and significant than taking control of a situation. I know that it can be really challenging because when we hear that somebody is at a well done, right, you want to immediately jump in and fix and give a solution. But often, as long as we let folks share their human experience, they will find relief on the other end of that. They will find that they feel heard, that they feel represented. And so then I'm going to give you another gift for your back pocket. And this is another kind of food related tool and resource because at CHOW, we really like to be punny. So this one is called tacos. And tacos will make it very easy to remember, as the CHOW folks who do our mental health course like to say, who doesn't love tacos? Put them in your back pocket for when you need a snack later. So TACOS is an acronym that stands for T, take in what your peer is saying. A, accept that it is their experience and their reality in this moment. C, condense and listen for clues. O, offer support how they requested it. S, seek opportunity to follow up. So the practical delineation of this is I'm now doing a pre-shift. It is 5 p.m. I've got the whole team together. I'm running you through the specials. What's 86? What are we focusing on for the day? and I'm doing a temperature take with the team, and I've got 2 well dones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build into that time that I've allotted to the temperature take. I'm going to make sure to either in this position, and when we are having challenging conversations, this is another great thing to keep in mind. When we are having challenging conversations, be sure to be mindful of the space that you are having this conversation in. So I'm going to evaluate whether I have the bandwidth right now to check on this person's well done. I'm going to make sure that I'm being mindful of the space. Is it better to have this conversation in front of the team? I'd like to model some good behavior, so I would like to do this in front of the team. I'm also very keenly aware I manage a team internally at CHOW, and I am very open about my well dones. It is very important to me to check in as well done when I am feeling well done, because I want folks to know that I am effective, I can continue my job, and also I need a little bit of grace today because I'm a human being who showed up with my whole self, and my whole self just happens to have been on the grill for far too long. So in this example, I'm going to take that well done, and I am going to say, hey, you checked in, well done. Before we hop on the line, I wanted to ask a little bit more about that. Is there something that you can share with me? I'm going to start with that T. I'm going to take in what my peer is saying. I'm going to try to listen without distraction and without judgment and without offering feedback. That's the key. I'm not fixing, I'm just listening. I'm going to accept that what they're sharing is their experience, even if I see it differently. So if I know that the reservations that are coming through are perfectly timed. I'm not feeling stressed about the service. And this person is telling me that they're at a 10 out of 10 because they're incredibly stressed and they feel like they're going to be slammed. I'm not going to try to superimpose my human experience. All I'm doing is that I'm accepting that this is how it feels to you right now. This part can be particularly challenging because we love to be fixers, and I totally understand that. Then C, I'm going to condense and I'm going to listen for clues. So I'm going to repeat it back to them. So what I hear you saying is that you feel like we're going to get a big rush. You're going to be slammed and you're feeling a little overwhelmed before the shift even starts. Am I getting that right? I'm still not fixing. I'm just letting them hear what they said to me, and I'm mirroring it back to them. And I'm going to offer support, how they requested it. So instead of saying, well, great, we need to get through service anyway, and I can see you're not in the right headspace for this, so let me go ahead and send you home and get the rest of the team squared away. I am not going to offer the solution. I'm going to offer some ideas. Would it be better to give you some space and you can take a 5-minute walk before we start? Can I get you a glass of water? Do you need a fresh air break an hour into the shift? How can I support you in this moment? And allow this person to tell you what they need versus you having to overextend to try to figure out how to fix this challenge in the moment, right? This is how we manage to maintain that balance of caring about the guest experience, honoring our bottom line, caring about ourselves so that we don't take on everyone's problems, challenges, and burdens, while at the same time honoring that there is a person in front of me who is feeling very well done and I want to offer support. This is how we kind of toe that balance. And then the final one, which is the most important one, seek an opportunity to follow up. What this says, being able to show up in clock in on Tuesday and say, hey, do you remember on Friday when we checked in with each other and you were well done? We went ahead and we did that fresh air break. How did that feel for you? Did it actually make it easier? We got through service. Everything went really well. These are some challenges that came up. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like we handled it better, or is there something that might be more beneficial the next time that this comes up? And what this says is, I don't just care about you in a time of crisis that affects our dinner service or affects our bottom line. It might seem like a really small thing, but what it does is it creates a system of trust, that follow through, that allows for that person to then come to you the next time that they are feeling some type of way, and they know that they can speak to you without you trying to handle it, suppress it, get rid of it, try to shuffle it out of the kitchen or the restaurant or the hotel so that you can get back to service. And these small things practiced consistently allow for a culture of transparency, of self-reporting, and open and assertive communication, which is something that can make a really healthful team. Now, another additional question that we get is, how do I manage having really difficult conversations? We are navigating uncharted territories, folks. So while it seems like a completely innocuous thing to walk into work and say, hey, I see you struggling with your mental health. How can I support you? A lot of times we don't know how to do that in a way that is going to keep everyone safe. CHOW has a really cool resource for this. So head right back to the website where we have the free workplace wellness toolkit, and we've got literally, y'all, Scripts for Challenging Conversations. And this is a very dense document that has a kind of summary in the beginning for what conversation you might want to have. Somebody, you are worried that someone is struggling with their mental health. And let me tell you, these are like challenging things to notice. Another thing you can put in your back pocket is MEES. It's another cool acronym that we like, maintaining interest in someone else. What that does is it allows for us to be neutral observers of the team, to keep track of the team without feeling like we are at the core of protecting the team, right? When we all have the same resources and we are practicing them in times where things are not very heated, we are very comfortable pulling them out when things are heated. So when we're maintaining interest in someone else, you might find yourself about to have a really challenging conversation because the person that you work with that typically shows up 15 minutes early, has their chef coat super pressed, is ready to go. You know, they've got their notepad in their hand and they are ready to go 15 minutes before everyone else, is now showing up a little late, and they're groomed differently. And you notice that they've been hanging out for a shift drink at the neighborhood bar a little too often and showing up a little later the day after. And you ask yourself, how do I even approach this to keep them safe? Well, we've put these scripts together for you, and these scripts are vetted on both sides. One, by both employment lawyers who make sure that your language is not going to violate any kind of fundamental employee rights. And two, trauma-informed clinicians who are going to make sure that this conversation is protected, it is safe, it is trauma-informed, and that we are not being careless, callous, and asking questions centered around mental health that might be triggering towards somebody. And this script will walk you through literally employee, manager, and will tell you the healthful ways in which, with assertive, open communication, you can start to have these conversations that are slowly going to shift that culture in a workplace that allows for people to comfortably self-report without worrying that, hey, if I'm going to my boss and I'm telling them that I'm struggling, I might get my hours taken away. I might get a demotion, and all of the really scary things that are part of the unknown when we are embarking in these really uncharted territories, because these conversations are super new. So something that you can practice today before you inevitably go download that free scripts for challenging conversations is to arm yourself with the things that you can control, because the way that we show up informs kind of the mood of that conversation. So make sure before you ask these questions, before you do the temperature take, before you try any of these resources, first and foremost, make sure that you are available emotionally and have bandwidth and capacity for this conversation. I know that this is super, super cheesy, but we can't pour from an empty cup. We can't show up effectively for others if we have not shown up effectively for ourselves. Now, that doesn't mean you're living it well done, don't ever have the conversation, because it's super challenging to have the conversation. If you feel like you yourself can step outside and take a fresh air break, make yourself a cup of coffee and regroup for a moment before having the conversation, that's good enough. That's absolutely okay. We don't need the perfect moment. We need a safe moment so that everyone can understand, what kind of emotional place we're operating from. 2, pick a good, neutral physical space. Be mindful of spaces. I had somebody tell me I did this for years, and up until my sous chef told me, I had no idea that I was doing it. All conversations, whether they were positive feedback, negative feedback, they were in my office, not in the kitchen, and the door would be closed. And so every time he walked in, he was like, oh, am I fired? And I'd be like, no, you just got 3 great reviews and I wanted to go over them with you. And it took me forever to put together the dots that I was creating no psychological safety in those conversations. So telling somebody, hey, could you meet me in the kitchen near the communication binder in my office in 5 minutes? I'd like to talk to you about the positive feedback forms, or I'd like to find an opportunity to connect with you, allows for that person to show up with curiosity instead of dread and anxiety. Location matters. 3, read up on how to start the conversation. We have prep lists for everything. We have grocery lists, we've got prep lists, we've got side work lists. We are so familiar with checklists. And often what we hear is, I feel like if I open up this conversation, I can't predict what direction it's going to go into, so I don't know how to be prepared. It is totally okay to sit down, use the scripts for challenging conversation, use the temperature take so that you can put down some feeling words, and you can put the assertive communication exercise in your back pocket, which goes a little bit like this. I feel when you, I need you to, or else. I know that this sounds super, super limiting, but it's actually a great way to communicate, especially because we're really familiar with shorthand communication. So I need you to say, let's say I work in a kitchen and this person, one of the members of the team keeps coming up behind me. It is dysregulating to have them come up behind me while I'm doing prep, and we are just not communicating effectively. So now I'm just on edge the entire time. This keeps building and building. And so instead of offering that feedback when it comes up, I'm now waiting until I blow up a little bit to say, can you just say behind when you're coming up behind me? Can you say corner? This is unsafe behavior. If I can moderate myself, I can just kind of step back and I can say, when you step behind me and you don't say behind, I feel like I'm going to hit you and it makes me uncomfortable and I'm focused with what I'm doing. I need you to say behind, or I need you to not come behind this counter until my prep is finished. This way, we're communicating our needs, we are giving a suggestion for how they can meet our needs, and we're delineating boundaries. And I know that boundaries can be incredibly challenging, and they can seem like a kind of corrosive thing in a team. But if we know which side of the fence we are playing on, we can all play safely, right? So if I'm using this assertive communication to let you know, because sometimes we can't relate to the story, but we can relate to the feeling, right? You might not feel as dysregulated as I do when someone's walking around behind you and you've got a big sharp knife doing prep in front of you, but you certainly can relate to being annoyed. You can relate to someone not hearing you. So if I create an opportunity for connection where you and I are relating on the feeling instead of the specific incident, I'm telling you how the incident made me feel, and I'm informing your decisions going forward by telling you what I need from you in order to collaborate, then this challenging conversation with one exercise has just become enforced with a boundary, with a positive kind of actionable takeaway that we can do going forward. You and I are going to split our prep stations, or you are going to say heard, or I'm going to go prep over there. And now we have just taken this thing that could end up being corrosive, caustic, and incredibly upsetting in a team environment where we're trying to get through service. And we turned it into a collaboration because I was able to defend myself and my needs, and I was able to communicate them effectively to you. So this is to say,
real quick, we did get a question during this.
yes. Oh, beautiful.
And I like it because it seems really, really topical here. Is
Let's
this
do
why
it.
they say never work with friends or family because this can be overwhelming? Boundaries.
Oh my goodness. I love this question. Oh gosh, this is such a complex question. Ah, I love this. You know, here's what I've learned about family, and this is just my personal experience. The entire time that I was looking for places to look while I was in the industry, I should backpedal and say I'm a third generation chef. I was raised in the Mediterranean. My father was a chef. My grandfather was a chef. And my father's greatest life dream was that my brother, second one after me, would become a chef. It was greatly disappointing to him that I'm the one that followed in his footsteps instead. And so my entire professional life after arriving in the United States, I looked for, when I went to interview for different positions, I looked for managers and owners that would say, we are like a family here. And I loved that. I was like, that is exactly what I want. I want it to be like a family. In the years that I have had to unpack that, I have explored how often we break boundaries for our family, we overextend ourselves for our family, we forgive a lot of things that normally we are not contractually obligated to forgive at all, and we make a lot of concessions. And here's what I have learned about boundaries in that time since. I used to think that they were really, really punitive. I struggle a lot with the assertive communication exercise. We have a great mental health course in which we do role play with this assertive communication exercise. And I will never forget the first time that I did this mental health course with CHOW, just as an attendee, I was just interested. Their example was, let's do the assertive communication exercise. What happens if your standing manager, so let's say you're the chef and the front of the house manager is now calling you consistently on your day off at 11 o'clock to tell you what happened during service. And I was like, oh, I got this. This happens to me all the time. Any night that I used to clock out early, I would have the front of the house manager calling me when she was finished with her shift to say, would you believe that this person showed up late? Would you believe that they didn't do their side work? Would you believe this? And we would regroup and find a way to kind of make it happen in the morning. And I never put down a boundary. On my nights off, I would never go to sleep early because I knew that between 11, 12, 1 a.m., she would call me whenever she was done with inventory, and she would let me know what happened on this shift. And that was the very first example that I had to role play. And so I was like, I feel frustrated when I can't unplug for the night on my day off. I appreciate that you want to give me an update. I need you to call me at 9 a.m. the next morning so I can get some sleep, or else I'm going to have to turn my phone off. It made me sweat to say that. And I wasn't even in the industry anymore. I was like, there's no way that I would be able to do that. And in my time since, I have watched other chefs and food, beverage, hospitality workers practice this. I am here to say that when you practice healthful boundaries, there's a host of complex things that happens when you work with friends and family, right? Normally, you make a lot of concessions for them because you, on a personal level, have an investment in seeing them thrive, seeing them be happy, seeing them be healthful. But on top of that, there's definitely a lot of overextension. And the only thing that I have learned about boundaries is that they are safe delineations in the area with which we can be creative and collaborative together. So I used to receive boundaries as I could never tell somebody that I love, and that I value and respect because we work together. So she's shouldering that burden for me so that I can have my day off. Even though we weren't friends outside of the industry, most of you on the screen will know that sometimes you bond harder with those people at work. I spent more time with her than I spent with my husband in the 5 years that we worked together. And so she was my person, even if we didn't do a lot outside of the industry together. So putting down that boundary with somebody that I loved and respected and admired was, to me at the time, essentially saying, it's my day off. This is your problem. You deal with it tonight. And then I realized, one, I was not in that moment qualified to help her with whatever she was dumping on me. It was 11 o'clock at night. It was my only time to connect with my kids. I had just tried to smash into one day off all of my meal prepping, all of my laundry, all of my humaning, all of my connecting with my family. Everything that I couldn't do during the week, I had just done it in one day. I was tapped out at 0, and I was scraping my can of capacity so that I could show up for her in a way that, to be honest, wasn't even effective for her. She wasn't getting a great sounding board. She was just getting, I hear you. Yep. And then what would have happened is if I had asked her to reconnect with me at 9 a.m. the next morning in my office when I'm ready to go with a cup of coffee in front of me, I could have actually effectively helped her brainstorm some of those things. I could have been an effective sounding board. I could have been a good partner in those interactions. So a lot of what I perceived as putting down really bad boundaries with friends and family would have been, I believe, transformative to creating conversations that were collaborative, valuable, and transformative for both people. Boundaries are your friend. Boundaries are your friend. All of this to say, these awesome, actionable, free, accessible tools and resources are available to you. We want to essentially empower you with all of these things so that when you are showing interest in someone else, which is kind of inevitable, right? We are primed to remember people's birthdays, anniversaries, recipes off the top of our heads, regulars' favorite drinks, the food cost of a potato 6 months ago so that we can remember what the potato costs today. So we are uniquely primed for observation. And oftentimes what happens when we have those skills in observation, but we don't have any tools and resources to effectively support people, that can feel like a burden. It can feel like I'm watching somebody struggle. I'm watching somebody go through a hard time, and I don't know how to approach them about it. And even if I were to approach them, what could I possibly effectively do? How do I have this conversation? And what happens once I sit down and I give them the place, a protected place in order for them to talk to me, and I set up that container? What happens if something outside of my control happens? Well, I am concerned, but I am not qualified. Sometimes the gentlest thing that we can do is say, I hear you. Thank you for sharing that with me. You know, I've been noticing that things have been a little crunchy with you lately. And so I've been wanting to support you, but I didn't know how to approach this. And I'm glad that you've shared this with me. Let's sit down together and open up the CHOW website. Let's see if there's a meeting happening near you. Let's do we have an EAP option that we can get you connected with? Have you ever tried this? Have you ever tried that? Let me sit with you while you get connected. Sometimes the most powerful thing that we can do feels like we're not doing enough. And I would challenge everyone who is here to remember that overextension is not the way that we show up for people. In order for the workforce to be sustainable and supportive, everyone must have access to the same resources. We practice them in downtimes. Another awesome thing that I have heard about, a practice that I have heard about that we have again in our workplace wellness toolkit, which I thought was really rad. I'm sure everyone on the screen is familiar with the really, really robust onboarding practices that we have in our industry. There is so much paperwork to fill out. If you have an HR department, that paperwork is doubled or tripled. And so every time someone is being onboarded onto the team, they have so much paperwork to do. And we heard from an organization that said, you know, once you are done with the kitchen tour, for example, and you walk your new hire to the communication board in the back of the kitchen and you encourage them to put their number down so that the team can have their number, and you show them where they will be on the schedule, ask them to put 988 on the phone. 988 is a phenomenal way to protect your mental health and your team's mental health. And it is an awesome skill to have in your back pocket. We all know 911, and that is exactly the kind of like fast relationship that we can have with 988, which is just a mental health service. And I want to cap this by saying, even though 988 is a crisis text line, you do not just have to use it in times of crisis. We have shown folks how to do a 988 walkthrough where 988 is perfectly prepared and trained to do walkthroughs with people. So you can text 988 and say, hey, my name is Jasmine, and I'm just texting the service to see how it works. And you'll have a person greeting you on the other end to say, hi, my name is Bob, and I'm glad to check in on you. How's your day going so far? And you can do a practice run. And so we have had folks say, once you take folks to the communication board and give them their schedule and finish their onboarding, ask them to put 988 on the phone. And if not just for themselves, ask them to put it in their phone so that they could share it as a resource to the team in case anybody comes to them and asks for it. So there are so many incredible ways that we have to be able to offer one-on-one support without overextending ourselves. While we recognize that right now the hospitality industry is growing in a way that the mental health care industry is not able to meet that need, and we want to make sure that everyone knows that these resources are available so that they can use them, so that we don't lose anyone else to suicide, to substance misuse, to the things that have directly influenced and historically influenced our industry for so long, and that make it so that each one of us is carrying a really painful, heavy story of someone that we knew and loved within the industry, and we might have lost because they weren't able to get the support that they needed. So in order to keep the industry going forward in a healthy, insane way that supports everyone, we believe that the answer to that is education on resources, being able to use those resources. I cannot say it enough, role model using those resources. Feel free to show up tomorrow and talk to somebody on the team about how easy it was to download this PDF and share it, print it out, put it in a binder right next to the chemical list. Try an EAP and talk to everybody about how easy or challenging it was to be seen, what the turnaround time was. One of the best ways that we can support others is by showing them how we support ourselves. We know service. We intrinsically know service. We are primed for observation. And when we are able to offer that same service to ourselves and to our team members, we create a food, beverage, hospitality industry that allows for folks to show up as whole human beings who are capable of taking care of themselves and each other the way that they would take care of food cost and sustainability practices and guest-focused interactions and all of the things that we fundamentally deserve as human beings as well.
Thank you so much. We are almost at the end. So if anyone has any final questions, now would be a great time to ask them. I did just want to say a huge round of applause for Jazz and Chow, and thank you so much for such an incredible and informative presentation. We really appreciate you taking the time to share these really important insights and look into workplace wellness. It has been, I have to say, 10 years since I've been in the industry, and I vividly remember feeling some of those overwhelmed just what is going on feelings. And, you brought a lot of that back. And thank you so much for what you're doing for people now. So I also want to say thank you so much for today's webinar sponsor, Hormel Food Service. Um, for everyone that is on here, I'd like you to be on the lookout for the survey that you'll receive in the next couple of days. It'll include a taping of this webinar, and it'll have what you need, the survey you need to complete your continuing education hour. It'll also have the resources from CHOW that Jazz has been talking about, taco, temp, all of that great stuff will be in there so that you have it in your back pocket and you can share it with your team. So we want you to be on the lookout as well for our next webinar on August 28th. It is with Chef Ken Arnone. He is continuing the conversation on workplace wellness with a special session on the Chef's Balancing Act. As always, to learn more about upcoming webinars or events, visit acfchefs.org and click on the Events tab. On behalf of ACF National Office, thank you, Jazz, thank you, Chow, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Have a really great day.